This is Keith with the Citizen Effect Podcast. I am 100% of Whiddon Criminal Defense, and joining us live from a tattoo shop is 100%, or well, I don't know what percent of Eorm Young, but 50% of Erase My Arrest, Mr. Devin Jones.
All right. Hey, Keith. Devin Jones, one half Race My Arrest partner, Eorm Young. I guess today we're going to do it live from the tattoo studio.
And today we are joined by Mr. Greg Green, who has threatened that it's going to be one of our shorter episodes. But Devin and I knowing Greg as long as we have, I'll believe it when I see it. So, Greg, go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Green, and I'm an attorney here in Washita Parish. For some reason, I thought I could mentor Keith and Devin. That was a poor choice of probably mentoring ability. I've learned probably more from them than they've ever learned from me. I've practiced law in Washita Parish for I'm working on my 36th year. At 61 years of age, I may have probably about 9 more years left in me. We've rotated the burnout tires 3 or 4 times. I like what I do. It's not the worst thing that you can do for a living. You can make a good living, and you can help a lot of people. I've written some notes down, but probably I'm going to wind up throwing them away. Keith told me I could say whatever I wanted to, but I'm not going to swear today because I want to at least seem reasonably educated. I've practiced law long enough and I've lived long enough that I have seen basically a Copernican change in American life. And Copernican change is kind of like Copernicus discovered that the sun was the center of the universe rather than the earth. Well, we've kind of had that kind of a change over the past probably 40 years. And some of it has been good, some of it's been really, really bad, but we've had a massive explosion in technology. And one of the things that, I tell these guys stories about stuff that happened when I first started practicing law in 1987. And time and politics have changed so much. I mean, I listen to them tell me things, and it's like, oh my gosh, that was, you probably need to go talk with somebody about post-traumatic stress disorder. Things have changed so greatly since I started practicing. If only the advances in technology, this setup is something that I couldn't have imagined when I first began practicing law. I couldn't have imagined, what is that, a terabyte on that, in RAM on that laptop?
1 or 2, sure.
But you see what I'm saying? I mean, when I bought my first computer in 1998, it was 3 megs of RAM, okay, with a keyboard. And that was considered to be top of the line back then. It was $2,500. Now you can go out and get something like that for what, $350, $400?
Maybe not this one, but sure. But we carry around something.
I mean, my phone has 64 gigs. Okay.
And that's light. That's conservative.
Yeah, that's conservative. That's a cheapo one, basically. But like you said, it's light, that's conservative. It's about the size of a pack of cigars was when I graduated from law school. I mean, geez.
Well, Greg.
So I guess
you kind of.
What are you saying, Devin?
I said, well, Greg, you've got about 36 years solo practice, and now the technology changes. Is it a climate that's easier for a solo practitioner to go now, or is it more difficult than when you started?
Devin, the thing that I kind of prepared my remarks today, you're kind of playing into it a little bit. Some of it is more difficult. I'll tell you, I started immersing myself into some of this stuff in 1998. People laugh all the time and say, you still have an AOL email address? Well, yeah, that's what it was when I started in 1998. But I've got a couple of other ones since then too. in some respects, the word processing stuff, I'm kind of stuck about 10 years behind on word processing. People are like, you still use word perfect? Yes. It's what we grew up on, what we cut our teeth on. I can use word to some extent, but it's not as intuitive to me as word perfect. Some of the document transfer stuff that we have going on totally blows my mind, okay? But as far as being able to get things done more speedily, to transfer documents, to transact business, it has improved some things for a solo. Trying cases in the new electronic climate is particularly from the plaintiff's personal injury viewpoint, Devin, is kind of mind blowing. But it can be done, and to some extent, it's easier for a solo. But taken another way, it can be more difficult for a solo. But with all the things that have changed in 36 years, there's some things that are basic that never change. Okay, and that's kind of what I came prepared to talk about today. For all the technology, for all the bells, for all the whistles, at the end of the day, it's still going to be that personal relationship between you and your client, that personal relationship between you and co-counsel, that personal relationship between you and opposing counsel, the personal relationship with you and the judge, okay? And there's some basic principles, and they're kind of, maybe based in Christianity and Scripture, and I've gotten to the point where when I read, I have to take my glasses off. I'm very nearsighted, but I've gotten very farsighted. And if you've ever been farsighted and nearsighted at the same time with an astigmatism, that too can change your view of the world in a Copernican way. For all the change, for all the stuff, all the stress, one thing that I've noticed about the technology, Devin, is there's never a time when you can turn off. You've got to be on, 24/7 in a lot of ways. So you have to be extra careful about setting boundaries. You can get burned out really easily. I think it increases stress levels, general ugliness in behavior. And I mean, I know you can speak to the general ugliness in behavior thing because, fairly or not fairly, and I'm more prone to say not fairly, knowing you the way I know you, Devin. The ugliness that has crept into our daily discourse, not just political, but just daily discourse amongst each other and our basic daily communication with each other. I think it's increased substance abuse, stress. I think it's increased mental health problems, the whole 9 yards. And you look around for solutions to some of this stuff. And while I'm going to tell you that setting boundaries is great, you need to set boundaries. There are 3 basic ideas that I have that never, ever fail. I think they're timeless ideas. They don't fail the trials and the tests of time. And they're based on Christian thought, but there are other sources for these ideas that don't even come from Christian thought because some of us act like jerks. And I get it. I don't know why we who follow Christ, who was, preached one of these ideas about service to others incessantly and judge not lest you be judged. I don't know why we feel like we can set ourselves up on a pedestal and judge other people, but God help us, we do. But the 3 basic ideas that never fade, and they're based, like I said, on Christian thought and Scripture, but other great thinkers have said the same thing that weren't necessarily Christian based. I just happen to like the idea that they're Christian based because being a Christian and reading the Bible, you readily find the source material at your fingertips. The first of these ideas, and this is something that I one of my pet ideas, if you really want to be great at whatever you do, whether it's practicing law, cutting hair, erasing people's arrests, running somebody's law office for them, you got to first concentrate on being a great servant. And there are a couple ideas that go with that. The Martin Luther King quote about for people to really care about how much you know, they got to know how much you care. That goes in with that, and that goes in with the idea of love. A new commandment I give you: love one another. That's if you really want to be great, you got to love other people enough to want to serve them and serve them the right way. And this requires something that we don't really get a lot of nowadays, which is a focus on the needs of others. We're all gimme, my name is Jimmy. I gotta have this, I gotta have that. Golly, look what the Joneses got, I gotta keep up with them. We're always trying to keep up. We're always trying to strive and get ahead. And to back off a minute and try to figure out what the other guy needs is something else. Earl Long said, I gotta know where he itches so I can figure out where to scratch him. Well, that's a kind of a crude and a country way of saying, if you want to be a great servant, because you got to focus on these others. You got to focus on meeting their needs, giving them what they need, and you got to want to take care of them. And if you can put that idea into practice, chances are that's something that's going to not only grow your business, but it's going to grow your satisfaction in your business, and it's probably going to grow your ability to have longevity in this business, because this business will eat you alive. And you and I were talking earlier today about people that are set up to enforce the law, and or district attorneys can fall off the wagon too, and set up things to where they're taking money from people that they don't earn necessarily. And I'm not going to repeat the story, but I mean, these things happen, and it happens because people lose sight of that basic idea of being a great servant. I think that you can look through history and find that people who were great at serving others wound up being great people because they were given more and more responsibility and more opportunities to serve others. However, you can take my theory with that and run down to CC's and pay $3.25 and get a really nice cup of coffee au lait with the dark roast coffee with the chicory in it, which is so good,
Well, and you talked about how it increases, your personal satisfaction, but it also increases your client satisfaction.
Exactly. Look,
because happy clients beget happy clients.
Happy clients beget happy clients. They get references. They beget good ratings on Google. They beget, but they also beget friendships with people. And while you have to be careful about that and not let it erode your professional detachment, in other words, your ability to look at somebody and lovingly tell them unpleasant truths in a way that they can understand and operate with, you also, though, because you're doing that, the main idea is doing it to help the other people. The stuff that comes along and flows from that is a beautiful thing too. Like you said, client satisfaction leads to more clients, but that's what we're here to do, is to serve and satisfy others when you're in a service profession like we're in. Now, the second idea.
Hold on. What's up, Devin?
Well, Greg, kind of on your first idea, and I can tell you as a young lawyer, the technology for us brings in, and Keith can tell you, we kind of talked about it 2 nights ago with clients and client control. The technology brings access, and with access becomes the necessity for these proper boundaries, because at some point you are friendly with your clients, but you have to be professionally friendly. And so over the years, how have you developed that professional friendship?
Roger sang that song, and it's about a young kid that's riding in the night with a gambler, a professional gambler, and he's wanting to learn how to be a gambler. And the gambler's telling him, the things you got to be able to do. And then I think about the old Dean Martin saying about, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from exercising bad judgment.
Well, I told someone earlier today, I've learned a lot of lessons, and most of them the hard way.
But when you think about it, there are three basic ideas that you got to gather from that, Devin. Number one, you've got to learn how to listen to people in a way where you can see what it is they want, but also see what it is that is inside them. You've got to learn how to, a politician will learn how to read the room. We have a little simpler job. We have to learn how to read our clients, okay? And so when you talk about maintaining professional friendship, you've got to be able to read that client, okay? The other thing you've got to do is, no matter what else happens, you've got to be able to look that client dead in the eye, and you got to be able to say, hey, look, that's not going to work. I can't do that. You don't want to do that. That's not smart play. These are all things that I've used with clients before. Client control begins with setting the foremost boundary of, there are things that I won't do. Okay? I will not lie for you. Okay? I will not help you lie to a tribunal. I will not help you lie to anybody. Okay? And then that has to be backed up with a very strong boundary that, if you lie to me, please don't let the door of my office hit you on the behind on the way out, because it's going to leave a mark. And my doorknob is shaped funny. It's going to leave a funny shaped mark that you'll have to explain to your friends. The point is, candor and caring directed in a way that helps people solve a problem while maintaining their responsibility for the problem, if they have responsibility, or their responsibility for communication, helps promote the professional friendship. So you got to care, but you can't let your caring get so wound up that you allow people to make you forget what your purpose is in life, which is to help them solve their legal problems. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense, because I've had to have that conversation a couple of times here lately with clients, whether it be in that first meeting with the client, and you have to have a very, very what's the word I'm looking for here? A very precise conversation where they need to understand that one of us is the lawyer and the other one of us is the client. And they need to understand from the beginning who's going to be who, because if they're interested in being the lawyer, then I'll step aside.
Well, this brings me back to what Frank Monroe told us in first semester towards LSU Law School back in '83. A fella that represents himself has and I'm going to quote Mr. Monroe with perfect accuracy, has a damned fool for a client. I've told people before, why do you want to pay me if you don't want to listen to my advice?
Mm-hmm.
You're wasting your money.
Mm-hmm.
You bring up something else too. There's always somebody that exercises control, even over your client. There's always somebody that's in the background exercising control. Sometimes you've got to figure out who that person is and meet with them and your client at the same time.
Yep.
And convince them of the necessity of, hey, letting you be the lawyer. Mm-hmm. But to recap, you got to let them know you got to let them know, as Keith says, who the lawyer is, but you've also got to let them know, your boundaries. And there are some people because of their mental health issues or whatever, they're not going to be able to maintain adequate boundaries, and you're going to have to do it for them. You're going to have to maintain stronger boundaries. And and there are just going to be some people that you just have to look at them and go, you know what? I'm sorry, but I'm not who you need.
Yep.
And that is humbling in some respects, but I'm going to tell you that I'd rather have a mistake or have a setback that kept me a little humble than have an achievement that elevated me to the point where I wasn't able to where my head got so big I couldn't walk in the doors of my office. I mean, Dirty Harry, the character Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood's character Dirty Harry said it best. A man's got to know his limitations. You got to know where your limits are, and you got to be able to tell them where their limits are in a way that doesn't make them run out of the room screaming.
Go ahead, Devin.
You said something about knowing when to not have them be your client. I think this is year 11 for me. The first maybe 8 years, I was always fearful. If I refunded a client money and just said I can't do it for you, it was a failure. In the last 2 years, I've learned it's probably the healthiest thing I can do is say, you know what, if that's what you want, we're not on the same page. Here's your money.
Devin, I'm going to tell you something. I've done this for almost 36 years. I have never regretted telling somebody no. But I sure as hell's blue brimstone have regretted telling somebody yes a couple of times. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you that that's just the way that is. Now I'm going to go into my second idea, which is when you decide to do something, maybe do just a little bit more than's required. Don't do it to where it messes boundaries up, but do just a little bit more than is required. That sort of thing. First of all, people in particularly now with everything in such a hurry and everything, based on, I mean, we thought that, I was born in 61. I graduated from high school in 79. They called us the instant generation. Oh no, they haven't seen the instant generation. I mean, you can find stuff on the computer within, my twins are finding stuff on the computer to answer a question within, milliseconds.
Have you heard of ChatGPT yet?
I have heard of it. I have not personally investigated it, but I understand that there are some problems with ChatGPT causing people to have mental issues because it's rejecting the people that are trying to chat with it. They're trying to make these artificial intelligence friends, and it's like, what do you do when your artificially intelligent friend, who's a fake friend, it's a total creation of the internet, says, dude, I can't hang. I mean, that's got to be soul crushing. Because it's something that's out of the construct of your own mind. You put it into the computer. And your own mind doesn't want to be with you. Think about how soul crushing that is. The other thing about doing a little bit more than is required is it's a pleasant surprise 9 days out of 10. And then,
well, I mean, on that end,
you're building good rapport. Again, you're building good rapport.
I mean, on my end, I have developed a little bit of a reputation of not having the very best bedside manner, of sometimes being. I've been accused of being a little bit blunt about things and a little bit too straightforward about things. But the fact of the matter is, number one,
that's how people know that I've mentored you for a little while, because I have a tongue like a 12-gauge shotgun, and I just, I finally had to learn that when you shoot your mouth off, it's like shooting that 12-gauge. You basically, once the pellets leave the front of the barrel, you can't get them back, and they can do immeasurable harm to you and others. But there's nothing wrong with being plain spoken to a client and letting them know what the boundaries and the expectations are.
Yes.
And there's absolutely nothing. I'll tell you what happens when you do that. I have people come in all the time. I know, you tell it the way it is. And that's what I want. That is exactly what people want.
Yes.
They want to know what their peril is, and they want to be able to understand what you're telling them about their peril, in plain and unvarnished language.
That's exactly right, because that's my take on things, is that I want to be able to, what I found even in the last couple months is that clients and potential clients come to me, whether it be from, they haven't spoke to other lawyers, or maybe they have spoke to other lawyers, and they want education. They're starving for details and to understand what is happening to them. Even though they lack some locus of control over it, they want to understand the process, understand what it is they are going through. And so if I can give them education and give them a conservative outlook on things, then whenever we get to a place where there's a result, I may have over delivered. And so, said another way, it's under promise but over deliver.
You and I have talked about this before, and I'm always one that lays it out at the first meeting. I would rather spend an hour or an hour and a half on a first meeting with a client and have fewer meetings where I'm having to explain, stuff that's gone sideways than I would, have a 30-minute meeting and have to have numerous after meetings trying to explain why stuff is going on. I've always been one that gave a client more information I felt like they could handle, because they'll at least start asking you questions. You and I talked before about being big on under promising and over delivering, and that gets in with it. You give them a little more than what they're expecting. But what I have learned, and this was something I learned after about 5 years of law practice, finally it soaked into my head. Don't ever promise somebody something based on what a third party is going to do, because you don't know. You can think that third party is going to deliver right. You can think a lot of things about a third party, but I always tell my clients, I said, look, if a third party is involved, we don't know what's going to happen. I can probably make this happen, but you don't know. Somebody may have awakened one morning and decided to eat bacon instead of cornflakes for breakfast, and we could get a totally different result. Okay? You can't ever, you can always tell people what you're going to do, but you can't ever really give somebody 100% picture of what a third party's going to do. And I tell people, look, one of the reasons you hired me is because I am good at reading third parties sometimes, and sometimes I can kind of predict where things are going to go, but some of that is experience that's been developed through the exercise of bad judgment, like Dino said, and you get into that. But after you do this for probably 15 or 20 years, you just get to where I can look at somebody's body language in my office and I can tell you, okay, I think they're hiding something. I don't know what it is, but my red flag, my alarm went off, because somebody's not telling me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I mean, it gets to be something where it's an almost palpable, oppressive feeling that's in the room. You just look at me, oh, okay. So, and I've gotten to where too, I can listen to somebody and I can go, all right, somebody's getting some professional help for some mental health issues. And I think it's this one, or I think it's that one, and it tailors it tailors how I work with them and deal with them. But the third big idea here is that I was going to go into. You guys have raised some good questions, and we kind of talked about practice of law in general, and just kind of roughly covered some professionalism issues in a way that probably won't be good for bar credit for anybody. But
well, I don't think either one of us are here to necessarily appease the Bar Association. So,
well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to even speak to that. Jerry Jones told me something one time. We were on the elevator, and he goes, I like how you fly under the radar. That is a very valuable skill. And maintaining quiet, decent, do the next right thing behavior helps you fly under the right radar. And that gets me into my third point rather nicely. Do unto others, the golden rule. Some people say, well, that's karma. I think the golden rule is probably the root of anything that deals with karma and karmic debt. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Here again, it requires you to do what? Focus on others, put yourself in the shoes of others, and to realize that for whatever it's worth, it's not all about you. And that third thing, you're basically you're living up to the ideal there to some extent, but it's all based in your love for your fellow man. You can't be in a service profession and not have love for your fellow man. Now, you may get burned out and have some fatigue and what they call compassion fatigue. I never really knew what that was until I had somebody come into my office trying to peddle the same thing over and over and over again. And finally, after about the fifth meeting, I just turned around and looked at him and said, I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, but I'm not going to do anything you want me to do. What you're asking me to do is both morally and legally repugnant, and I'm just not going to do it. If you come back here talking about that again, I'm going to have to call law enforcement. And the guy leaves in a huff. I think, oh, great. He dies, and his relatives come by and go, listen, you're one of the only people that would sit down and talk to him. And I just wanted to thank you. And I thought, well, okay, go ahead and eat that slice of humble pie, son. You acted like a jerk. And that guy needs somebody to talk to. Look, my theory is that you last a lot longer at this if you find a way to put these things into practice on a day-to-day basis. Like I said about my theory before, you can go to CC's. I don't do Starbucks, I do CC's. You can go to CC's and get a good cup of coffee au lait with that New Orleans blend that Community makes with the chicory. That's just really, really good. And enjoy it. Setting the boundaries, Devin, the thing you said about setting boundaries, that's extremely, extremely important. And you and I have talked about this before. If you can't say no, you really can't say yes effectively. Does that make sense?
I think it's I tell people, yes, it does. And I tell people all the time, your most powerful answer is yes, your best answer is no. Because once you tell somebody yes, you can't come off that in this world. And not in the clients we have. Not without a lot of pain, not without a lot of probably breaking boundaries. So, again, your best answer is no. Your most powerful one is yes.
And you've got to be able to say no for a variety of reasons. And you've got to be able to explain the no in a way that makes it more palatable to somebody and makes it to where they don't take it personally. Somebody said one time you could watch The Godfather Part 1 and learn everything you needed to know about, practicing law. Number one, you keep the practice of law away from your family. You have a family life and you keep it away from your family. Number two, none of this stuff is personal. It's all business. They neglect to tell you that sometimes business can be rather personal. And then the third thing is that, whatever you do, you don't try to get in the way of another fellow making a living. You don't take his ability to make his living away from him. Now, I'm not talking about, somebody, that is taking money from people and not doing work or something like that. That's a totally different thing. But, always remember that we're all members of the same bar. We're all members of the same group of people. And you've got to find a way to work with that other person and recognize who the other person is. Sometimes my temper gets the better of me, and I forget that. But I found over the years that when I do forget that, I really, really regret it. And I also try to make an amend. In fact, I'll tell you, I lost my temper with a guy that is an attorney from Alexandria. And this was on a Friday afternoon, and I called him back Monday morning. I said, look, dude, I said, I lost my temper a little bit. I was a little disappointed in what happened. And I just wanted you to know that I'm not taking this personally with you. I think you're a good guy, and I think you're a pretty good lawyer. And I was just very frustrated by what happened with your client. And he said, man, I get it. And he said, I really appreciate you calling me. This gets back to, do unto others a little bit. It also gets back to the first of the three big ideas that I have. But don't ever be afraid to admit you're wrong or you made a mistake. And that's counterintuitive in some ways, but in some ways it's not. If people realize that you're willing to be honest, even when you make a mistake, they'll pretty well be able to take you for your word on everything else. Now, I'm not telling you should run around making mistakes. You can tell people, hey, I'm sorry I made a mistake. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you make one, on the rare occasions when you make one, on rare occasions where your judgment, you might have, let your judgment be swayed by something like anger or fatigue. People can see that a lot easier, and they're you can be human and be a professional.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're saying more than anything, especially on a professional to professional relationship, whenever you're working with other lawyers, it's that you need to be quick to apologize, even if you don't just feel like it merits an apology. I ran into this very recently.
I didn't say that.
Well, but let me explain.
But I'm gonna let you explain.
Yeah, and so here recently, I filed a motion and I used the word suppress in it, and the party on the other side felt like that was directed at them. And in criminal practice, I'm not meaning the other person directly. I mean the law enforcement agency, and that other lawyer, was a little bit upset. And
you're talking about evidence. You're not talking about people. You're talking about evidence.
Correct. Yeah, and whenever I realized that, I said, okay, I did go, as the kids would say, I went a little too hard in the paint, and I need to walk this back as best as I can. And so,
hell, Keith, you're a kid.
Well, I appreciate that. So, I do appreciate that. But anyway, I had to walk that back, and what I did is I said, you know what, look, I get it. That's a lesson learned on my part. And, I'm really good at learning lessons the hard way, so I won't make that mistake again. And I said, look, and it may not mean anything about this case right now. And in fact, my apology may not mean anything to you. And that's fine. But at least on a person to person basis, I do apologize. And so I think that that's where being quick to apologize whenever the situation merits it, because the fact of the matter is that outside of your being gaslit or something like that, you cannot dictate what another person feels. And you also have to take some responsibility if you know that you could have done something better.
But there are some people too that run through life looking for reasons to be either offended or angry. And that is something where you have to go, well, look, this is when you look at somebody and go, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
I regret that what I did seemed inappropriate, but I really can't, I don't think I can do anything about the way you feel.
Well,
that's one thing. But now,
but that takes a healthy level of being able to discern the two, though, as well. You have to be able to discern the person and the situation.
Discernment is a great gift, and That's why it's listed in 1 Corinthians and in Romans. But sometimes, and it also says in the word that, it's better to apologize for something, even though you're not the wronged party, that you're the wronged party and not the wronging party. Sometimes it's better to apologize, but there are enough things that we do that we need to apologize for, that we probably don't need to worry about making things up. However, I like your idea about coming up to that person. Look, I think you may have taken this, in a personal way, and I didn't mean it in a personal way, but I'll be more careful in the future. I don't find any fault with that, and I certainly think that was a polite and a professional way to handle it.
Well, and again, this is someone that I have a professional relationship with, and so I want to. I want to be able to work with this person in the future, and so I've got to be able to preserve that relationship as much as I can.
That gets into that too gets into or also gets into it used to be when I started out, Monroe and Shreveport were very similar jurisdictions. The bar was very collegial. North Louisiana has, in the rural parishes in North Louisiana, everybody was very collegial. You learned how to practice from older attorneys. You learned how to conduct yourself in court by watching them. The judges, would look in on you, make sure you weren't screwing stuff up. I mean, and when I say screwing stuff up, doing stuff that would get you in a jam or something. You're like, you don't want to do that. Don't do that again. Okay, fine. And you learned from that sort of stuff. And older attorneys said, listen, this is how you really want to do that. Or are you sure that you want to do it that way? And maybe you could try it like this. And I had the benefit of practicing law when people like John Harrison, John Joyce, Bob Kostelka, and Milton Moore were on the local trial bench. Robert Farr was there for a while. Gosh, he was tough. Charles Trother was on the bench at Western City Court. And these people made it a practice to mentor younger attorneys and teach them the ropes a little bit. And I'm not complaining about anybody because I know that I'm not complaining, but it's a little different mindset. And some of this has gotten kind of, well, it's just sad. But some of the people that came in after the people that I mentioned have, similar giftings. I'm not going to be mentioning names, but there are people that have very similar giftings. And we've been fortunate to have some truly smart people serve as judges in our judicial district and be promoted. I think, and the only reason I bring this up is because Judge Moore's retired. I think Milton Moore is one of the more well-read and erudite members of our judiciary. Not to mention the fact that he's just a really nice guy. I think that we've been extremely fortunate to have the judges we've had in the 4th District. This is getting back to the collegial nature of the bar. Alexandria was always a little less collegial than we were. In fact, they called Alexandria Little New Orleans, and New Orleans was the least collegial, area in our state. And Baton Rouge was kind of like North Louisiana. They were very collegial in their bar. Collegiality is a good thing, and it's a sign of healthy professionalism, in my opinion. But we've gotten farther and farther away from that the older I've gotten, and I've seen things, and I'm just like, why didn't you pick up the phone and call that guy or that woman? Why did you not call that attorney on the phone? Why did you not call that person? A 5-minute phone call would have resolved a lot of the bad blood there. Why didn't you go over there and say, hey, bud, let's go get some lunch? Why didn't you go over there and say, listen, I'm going to be over at Enoch's after work. I'll buy you a cold beer, or a Coke or whatever you want to drink. Let's sit down and visit a minute.
Or we can go on Tuesday and I'll buy you a free cheeseburger.
Yeah, but you don't want to do that because people think you're a cheapskate or something. But no, I tease. That's not a bad idea either. But we've gotten so corporate in our ideas about stuff. We've gotten so tied up in I don't know whether it's pride, whether it's fear, whether we've allowed technology to supplant the basic impulse to we've allowed it to supplant the basic impulse to be with other people, to talk with other people, to deal with things directly, person to person. But it's something that I think if you sit down with people and visit with them about stuff before it blows up, usually things get solved a lot better. And usually, you're putting into practice, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And also you're putting into practice, that first principle. I'm getting older, so I have to refer to my notes.
You're the first person to bring notes to the podcast.
Well,
I don't know how that makes you feel, but
the reason being is because I felt like if it was something that I was going to do, I wanted to do it to the best of my ability, and I wanted to jot some ideas down about things that I felt like would be helpful to anybody that was in business, but also anybody that was in our profession, in our professional business. And those are things that I've discovered that have helped me over the years. And I've gotten to the point where, I want to make a living. I want to, gosh, I got 2 girls, I've got 14-year-old girls. I've got to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, that's got to happen. But I'm also wanting to give back to my profession, to my town, to other people. And, maybe putting some of the ideas that I put forth today, that might not be a bad way of doing that to some extent. We can sit around and roar out war stories, over lunch sometime and laugh and have a good time remembering these people that have come before us.
Well, but you walk down this door, and normally I save this until last. I'm not going to let this be the last question, but you walk down this road, and what you want your future to be, or what you want to give back to the profession or those coming into the profession. And so the Citizen Effect podcast, the Citizen Effect, I credit Devin with this because he came up with it. The Citizen Effect means finding something and ultimately leaving it better than you found it. You found this profession, and you have seen it evolve, as you said, go through a Copernican shift in your 36 years.
Yeah.
And so what is going to be your citizen effect in whether it be the legal profession or in, being a better business person or mentoring the next generation of attorneys? What does that look like for Greg Green? What does Greg Green's legacy look like?
I'm not conceited enough to think that I'm going to have a great legacy. I'm just not. That's just, I hope that people will remember that I tried to put those 3 ideas into effect. I hope that people remember that if I told you something, my word was good. I hope people remember that I cared about them, that I did the best I could to do what they needed me to do. I hope people remember that at the end of the day, I was effective in the practice of law and that I helped people rather than harm them. And I hope that at the end of the day, after I'm dead and gone, somebody says, you know what, I remember that fellow. He was a straight shot. He took care of people. when he told you something, his word was as good as gold. Basically, simple stuff like that. And if that's the way I'm remembered, if that's the effect I have on the local citizenry, through maybe application of some of those things that I talked about earlier, or just in general, that's great. It also probably wouldn't hurt my feelings if they said, "Oh yeah, that's that guy that sang, and he did a good job of singing. He was a good singer." But for the most part, people just remember me as somebody that was reliable, whose word was good, and who did his best to help other people. I think that's a pretty good legacy. It's kind of prosaic, but it's still pretty good.
Devin, what do you think?
Well, Greg, you hit on something. You like to sing. I think something that people don't know about you is that you're pretty involved with the Strauss Theater. What do you have going on there, and how long have you been with the Strauss?
Actually, I'm not involved with Strauss. I'm involved with Ruston Community Theater.
Ruston Community Theater. Sorry about that. Your
No,
Ruston
no,
Community
you're
Theater.
cool. You're cool.
Because
I'm thinking about going to maybe try out for some things at Strauss. I'm actually right now. I'm trying to work on maybe recording some jazz and standards on an album. Working on that, but basically, I've taken a little break from RCT for a little while. I think the most famous, I guess the most famous role I had over there, I played the Ghost of Christmas Present in Mencken's version of A Christmas Carol.
You've done that for a couple of years, haven't you?
Well, they did it twice, and I've done it twice.
Right.
My friend Dee Alexander, who's my vocal coach, did that. And it's kind of funny, in 2017, I went over there because my brunette twin, as I call her, Libby, was wanting to go over there and be involved. I said, "Baby, I'll come over there." And then I auditioned, and boom, I get cast as one of the bigger singing roles in that play. And, it was a hoot, and I liked it. And I continued to do it for a little while. I may try out for something at Strauss. I may not. The Strauss is an interesting phenomenon in the city of Monroe. I hope I can get notified maybe next time something goes down over there. It's a musical. I'm not a bad singer. But, I also, I love doing the role of the Ghost of Christmas Present. It's so fun because, you start out and you're this Cockney street person with a sandwich board, and then you turn into the ghost with the most. It's like, wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey, boom, you're gone. And you're singing in this, and come try some, come buy some. You're telling Scrooge basically, hey man, you got to learn to live a little, give a little in a musical way. And then I love the Uncle Earl turn at the end. I call it the Uncle Earl turn when he comes out with, ignorance and want, and tells him, the way you're doing people and the way you're treating people, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have nothing but ignorance and want, because you're going to, increase poverty and not take care of people. And that's a beautiful idea and sentiment to set forth in that musical. But oddly enough, the only time I've ever won an award over there was when if you've ever heard of a musical called The Music Man, I didn't get cast as Harold Hill, but I was cast. Apparently, I have a fairly high range, and I was cast as J.C. Squires, which is the high tenor in that. You've heard the ice cream, when Harold Hill is, like conning the school board members. Well, I was Mr. Ice Cream. I was the high tenor. We all the quartet won what they call a Rustoni for that. It was cool, but it was cool singing in that quartet. And I've made some pretty decent friends over there. I used to have a lot more connections with our local music scene than I do. Having kids, Devin, will kind of pull you out of the local music scene in a big way. And I know you can relate to that.
Oh yeah, I can tell you right now. When I have just Skylar, which will be 16, all my kids in the next 3 weeks will turn birthdays. They have three kids turning birthdays in 9 days. But I can tell you, I knew a lot more when I'd had just Skylar. Nowadays, if you told me what was happening in the world, I'd be shocked because with 3, 5, and 15, I just don't have a lot of time.
I get it, man. I get it. And you think that when they grow up, your grown up kids don't call you as often, but when they do, it's usually to ask you for serious advice about stuff.
Or serious money.
Mine, basically, I've been blessed enough to get my boys pretty well off the payroll. Um,
Yeah,
that is a blessing.
we may have to discuss that secret you're holding.
Well, I've been telling you we need to go out and eat lunch for a while. Just give me a
Yeah,
call and we'll do that. I don't
that's
mind
right.
sharing that sort of thing.
That's
I'm
right.
not going to promise you that what I do would work, though.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this much. You may fancy yourself as not a great singer, but you've always been a great friend and a great resource whenever a young lawyer like me needs to have a question answered. And I actually found out about your theater work because I had to call you at 9 o'clock at night, and you said, "Hey, I'm at a rehearsal." And he called me in between rehearsals and quickly broke down for me what I needed on a case, which was pretty intricate knowledge, and with reckless abandon just gave it to me. And I'm always thankful for that friendship that we have and that professional friendship, along with that you are a dear friend and that you've been a great mentor.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if I helped you, I'm pleased. Devin, I remember being where you guys are. And yeah, in fact, you caught me that night. We were rehearsing. I was the ghost of Christmas Present. We were in dress rehearsal that night, and I had to go off to the side of the stage and say, "Hey guys, this is a buddy of mine. I got to take this call." But most of the time you've asked me questions and they've not been peculiarly hard. Um, you've got a fairly sound basis in civil procedure knowledge, and I'm going to tell you that I'm by no stretch of the imagination am I a genius. I've just seen some stuff shake out, and if the advice I gave you worked for you, man, I'm glad. Um, and Devin, in a lot of ways, I think of like you guys, particularly you and Keith. I think of y'all as kind of like my nephews. I've got a couple of nephews, but none of them practice law. But I think you guys kind of like my nephews, and sort of, well, I kind of get to, answer the questions and, say a couple of salty little things and make everybody giggle a little bit, and then, but everybody gets their business straight. But, anything I've done that I've helped you with or helped Keith with, look, man, if it helps you, I'm glad. I'm here again, that gets back to, giving back to the profession and doing things like that. Anytime you can help somebody, and if I can help you stay out of trouble, that's even better. You know,
Keith may need lunch then.
No. We have all firmly established, and I have reminded people even of late that my days of causing trouble are over with, as one of our other fellow members of the bar told you whenever he asked how I was quite a few years back. Thank goodness all those years are behind me. Asked how I was doing, and you said, "Well, he's got a couple issues," and he just said, "Well, Keith just isn't any good at being bad," and if another one of those lessons I learned the hard way. I'm no good at being bad. So I have been lucky to stay out of trouble. So, and now that we're kind of segueing into more of a lighthearted thing, I said that the citizen effect question is normally the last question. But the fact of the matter is that, Greg, you're full of wild stories that are incredibly entertaining and hilarious. And I cannot let you off of this podcast, especially since I warned you. You text me at 10:30 Wednesday night And my phone went off, and Charlie said, "Who is that?" And I said, "That's Greg." She said, "Shouldn't Pawpaw be asleep?" And so I warned you. I said, we might need a war story. And so, being that you are full of them, you've got to give me and Devin and the listeners one good war story before we leave this room.
I am not going to tell any stories like I would tell on any of these folks that I've practiced law with over the years.
No, all names and identities are changed to protect their innocence.
I'm not going to do that, but what I am going to do, this is a story. My wife hates when I tell this story, but this is a story I'm going to tell. It's about singing. You know, if you sing in church or you sing, your relatives and people around you are going to ask you to sing at a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I've told you.
You've told me this story, and I love it. Devin, were you there when he told this story? We had dinner at the big house.
No, I hadn't heard this one.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes, this is all right. Yeah, tune in.
All right. This happened probably about 2006, 2007, and I've been married to Denise about 4 years. And my wife, look, she was my choir director. I married my choir director at my church. She taught music for years, and she got a master's. She's in counseling now. My wife is just a brilliant soprano singer. I mean, sang the chorus of the Dallas Opera. Just very, very big soprano. My wife, y'all know Miss Denise, and everybody needs a Miss Denise. Okay, everybody needs a Miss Denise. Just lovely right down to her fingertips. Just super, super servant's heart. Beautiful person. My dad died relatively young in my life, and his older brother died when my grandmother had died about 6 months later. His older brother died driving back and forth from Houston to Equipment, Mississippi, to take care of business. And his wife lived for a long time, and she finally passed away in 2006. And so my cousin calls me, and she says, "Mama passed." I said, "Well, I'm truly sorry." She said, "Would you think about driving to Equipment, Mississippi and singing at Mama's funeral?" She says, I got that tape where you sang the Messiah and you're a good singer. Would you do that?" I said, "Listen, baby," I said, I'll do that for you. Don't you worry about it. I'm happy to do that for you." I said, "We'll just all get up early in the morning and drive that 4-hour drive to Equipment and y'all are at Waters Funeral Home." "Yes, we're at Waters." It's the only funeral home in Equipment. Equipment's got about 2,500 people. County seat of Clark County, Mississippi. And so we show up to the funeral home. We go in, and this is another way that technology has changed. You have a little TV with all the pictures floating around, and the theme music. So I go in there and do that, and I'm going in there. Well, this place has changed. The chapel's changed. So I looked at the chapel, looked at the, the podium where everybody's going to speak, and they've got a sound system and they've got an organ. Okay, good. And of course, my wife says, "I think I can play this organ." She says, "I'm not going to do any pedal work." I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, you know what I'm going to sing at a funeral, baby? I'm going to sing "In the Garden" and "How Great Thou Art." And usually in that order, Southern Baptist funeral, you sing one before the eulogy, you have the eulogy, then you sing the other one after the eulogy. They preach the funeral service, have an altar call, and then everybody goes to the graveyard, and then they go to the dinner. I mean, that's kind of cynical, but that's kind of the way it usually works. You get used to doing things a certain way. Well, I was up there, and this fellow walks up to me, and he's kind of got like a silver-looking shark-skin suit on. He's got like a kind of a purple lavender shirt on, and a striped tie with like silver, black, and lavender, that angled stripe.
Devin, I think he's describing a character out of the Righteous Gemstones. I think this is Jesse Gemstone incarnate.
No, this guy didn't look like Jesse Gemstone. He looked like he had a possum dye hairdo, which you know what a possum dye is. It's where the tips are brown, but everything else is kind of silver. So it looked like somebody cheaply combed some Grecian formula through.
I thought he was describing some of Keith's professional photos.
No, well, maybe early in my career, yes.
I have no idea, and I don't even want to have an idea about that. But this guy walks up and he looks like a cross between an older William Shatner and John Candy. And for those of you who are too young to remember John Candy, the larger comedian on Saturday Night Live, very funny man, and made some movies. And then everybody knows who William Shatner is. He's timeless, Star Trek all the way up through Boston Legal. And he says, "Hi, you're Greg." And I said, "Yes, I'm Greg. It's a pleasure to meet you." He says, "Listen, you don't mind if I do something musical?" I said, "No." I said, "Listen," I said, "my cousin called me. She said, 'Would you sing at my mama's funeral?' I said, 'I'll be glad to sing at Aunt Joy's funeral. Nothing will tickle me more.' I said, 'I'm just going to sing.' And I told him I was going to sing. I said, 'This is when we usually do it.' He said, 'Oh, that's fine.' I said, 'Okay, fine.' So I get up and I sing in the garden, sit back down. He does the eulogy. I said, 'Okay, so far so good.' I get up and I sing, How Great Thou Art. I sit back down, and he's telling the funeral home guy, he says, 'All right, now it's time for my track.' 'No, not that one, the third one.' And I went, oh boy, we're in for a ride here. This is going to be ugly. And I look at my wife, she says, turn around. I said, okay. So I'm sitting here and I'm in front of God and everybody sitting up here. And this guy hops down in front of the podium with his fingers doing this thing like some kind of heavy metal singer. And he starts singing. And what comes out of his mouth would have curdled milk. Okay, he was about a third flat, and it sounded like donkeys getting wormed. It was just horrible. And so I'm sitting here, and I'm like, oh my God, this has got to be this. Oh gosh, this is the worst thing, And I'm thinking, wow, what happened? We're supposed to have, preaching about what a nice person this person is. We're not supposed to have, some kind of weird Vulcan musical going on here. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God. So by this time I'm like, pinching my nose, and stuff like that. And I look at my wife, she's like, and so I'm sitting here and I'm trapped. You know how when something is really, really bad and you're trapped and you're going, I cannot laugh. I want to laugh, but I cannot laugh. And then I start having the idea, of my dad and my uncle in heaven and my grandmother boxing ears because they're laughing at this guy. And y'all probably behave better than that at a funeral, Gerald, Moody. And I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I'm just having even more trouble staying in control. And then I'm looking at my cousin, and she's out there, and she's getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I know this because I've known her all my life, but I also knew this because she looks a great deal like my Uncle Moody. And I knew what he looked like when he got angry, and she was really showing the family resemblance, because she was just getting angrier and angrier and kept looking at him and like doing this, like, shut it up, cut it off, that's enough. So we get through that 15 minutes, and I thought, okay, thank God, we're going to have an altar call. Nope. He goes into another one of these things, and it's even worse. If it could have been worse than the first one, it was. And by this time, one of my cousins, God bless him, had muscular dystrophy. He was in a wheelchair, and and that disease doesn't affect your mentality, but it affects your ability to express yourself and to move. And he kept asking my cousin, why won't he shut up? Why won't he shut up? And one of my other cousins is starting to hit his, fist with his hand with his fist. And I'm like, oh man, this is out of control. And the whole time I'm sitting up here and I'm pinching my nose, biting my lip, trying to keep from laughing. And there are other people that are starting to snicker now. Okay, so it's even worse. And I look at my younger brother, he's out there and he points his finger at me, he's laughing. Yeah, okay, Mr. Big Shot, you're in trouble now. I'm like, okay, pal, wait till we get in the truck. So we go and I turn around and look at it. He says, turn around. I'm like, oh God. So it's just getting worse and worse. I've almost chewed a hole in my bottom lip. It's just horrible. And I think, well, he's getting to the end of this one. Surely he's going to do an altar call. Nope. We go into 15 more minutes of this stuff, and if anything, it's gotten worse. In addition to the donkeys that are being wormed, we've got dogs howling in the background, and it's just, they're baying, raccoons, while they're hunting, and it's just gotten even worse. And I thought, dude, rather than write a funeral cantata, maybe you could write a Christmas cantata next time. It's just this huge mess. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like still fighting, pinching my nose, just squeezing my fist, trying to keep from laughing. And he gets into this deal, and I'm looking at my cousin, and she keeps trying to, finally she's so mad, she's
just cut it out already.
Just cut it. And the guy's oblivious. He's on another planet. He's perched on the rings of Saturn. He's totally disconnected from any form of reality. And so finally I look out at my cousin, and I've been fighting him. My little brother's laughing at me. My mother thinks he's crying, so she's rubbing his back. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's laughing, and she thinks he's crying. She's rubbing his back, So it gets to the point where, he steps up and he says, and we know what Joy would say if she was here today. And at that point in time, my cousin, God bless her, looked up and she said, STFU, shut the up. And when she did that, I busted out laughing. And when I busted out laughing, everybody else in the funeral home busted out laughing. So he can't get a word in edgewise for about 5 minutes because we're all screaming laughing. Okay. So he finally finishes up, and I go out to the line behind the hearse and I hug my cousin. I said, baby, I am so sorry. I laughed. I said, she says, just wait till I get him out to that graveyard. He better not do anything more than say a prayer and read a verse of scripture, or I'm going to whip his butt all over that cemetery. So we got out to the cemetery, and I just see her with her finger in his chest and just telling him what he needed to do. Of course, the really weird thing about it is I thought we had left him behind. We were leaving out the front of the funeral parlor, and he pops out behind a bush. He says, what do you think about that? And I just said, well, Hoss, that was unique. And then I thought, leave disturbing. And but we finally got settled down and got something to eat, and they had him over the other side of the room, and they were feeding him and everything. And I'll never forget, though, to make matters worse, we had a perfectly good Baptist preacher who was one of our relatives that preached right down the road in Laurel, Mississippi. And he would have done a great job preaching a funeral. And one of my other cousins, and this whole thing is like some sort of weird Jeff Foxworthy vibe. She just walks up to him and goes, you're older, but you're cute. I need a man. And I just kind of looked at her and I said, have you ever met your second cousin, the Reverend boom, boom, boom? And she just went, no. I said, listen, when we do things like that, we need to make sure that we're not, breaking the law. Okay. I think you're kind of close to breaking the law. You probably need to back off just a hair. But suffice it to say, that poor guy, when my cousin that had muscular dystrophy died, that poor guy showed up in Houston, Texas, and tried to muscle his way into doing his funeral. And one of my cousins had to rather forcibly show him the door. I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No,
not at all. Look,
I'm disappointed though, because you did not animate fully, because whenever you told the story the first time, it was, and we all know what Joy would say if she were here today, to which your cousin said,
STFU.
Exactly.
She was, and she, oh,
because to hear you say that story the first time around, you were very animated. You were very much in that evangelical preacher mode, and how very much how this guy was just
That
like,
dude,
and we all know
yeah, that dude.
what Joy would say.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that might have been what my dad and Uncle Moody would have said. Just shut up. Of course, that probably wouldn't have lasted as long as my dad or Uncle Moody had been alive, because they've been dragging him out the back door to kind of give him a lesson in manners.
Show him the parking lot.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that guy, yeah, he was excited. Uh,
Look,
but that's probably the best story I could tell that doesn't involve, things that the statute of limitations may not have run over.
Oh man! All right, Devin. Any closing remarks?
well, I can tell you this much, Greg. Everybody, if you're in the South, you're going to have a creepy funeral story. Probably, probably my worst one as an attorney would be in my last years of being a prosecutor. I went to the district attorney's brother's funeral, and as we're all standing in line, and Keith may know this story, we're all standing in line to pass the family. Everybody's somber. I shake my boss's hand. He pulls me in close and he says, he always called me baby boy. Baby boy, I gave you a pay raise. And I said, oh, okay. And he looks at me and says, well, what do you have to say? I said, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then I got to thinking, and everybody's looking weird at me. I said, I just in the middle of this funeral and standing next to this individual who's deceased with his brother and saying, thank you so much. And I thought, and that's probably my funeral oddity. It's not 15 minutes of killing possums. It's standing in front of all these nice elected people and thanking my elected boss in front of his brother's casket for a pay raise.
that yeah, the timing of that may have left something to be desired.
Well, the best part was I get out to the parking lot and a fellow prosecutor friend of mine who's there, who's still a prosecutor, uh, looks at me and said, did Jerry tell you that he gave you a pay raise when you passed by to talk to him? I said, I did. He said, everybody looked at me weird when I was thanking him. I said, well, they're probably looking at you weird because all of us who work for him are thanking him at the casket. And the poor guy who was talking to me is a very Christian individual, and I'm sure that it twisted him up.
Yeah, like I said, that's the most unusual experience I've ever had singing at a funeral, and I've sung at several. Of course, at least I didn't. At least I didn't have the experience that another friend of mine had singing at a funeral, and the lady's name was Carolina, and he wanted my friend to sing "Nothing Could Be Finer Than to Be in the Morning."
That's great.
He changed the end to with.
Mm.
He said that was the most awkward song I've ever sung at a funeral.
Mm-mm. Well,
All right. Well, gentlemen, it's been great.
so yeah, Devin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Again,
Greg.
we got Devin Jones. Devin, close out with your spiel.
Well, I'm Devin Jones. I'm one half race my wrist, partner at E1 Young, and this has been the Citizen Effect Podcast.
Greg, where can anyone that has lasted this long all the way to the end, an hour and 20 minutes in, now that it's officially our longest podcast when you threaten to be the shortest, where could anyone interested in you and your services and the stories that you tell, where could they find you?
They could probably find me at 409 Press Avenue in Monroe, Louisiana, which is one block off Louisville, on one of the one-way streets that runs parallel to Louisville. at 318-322-4477. I don't usually tell stories like this when I'm working, though.
All right. Well, so remember, listeners, if you go to them, you're going to have to specifically ask for the funeral story. And I'm Keith Whiddon,
I'm
100%
Devin.
of Whiddon Criminal Defense, 50% of Erase My Arrest. This has been the Citizen Effect podcast. Thank you, Greg. I do want to take an extra minute to express the same sentiment that Devin said. You've been my mentor since 2015, one of a few that I'm lucky to have. And so I have to express the exact same sentiment for all the time that you've taken to show me the way and otherwise pull me out of getting in someone's way as well. So I cannot thank you enough, and thank you for being a guest on the Citizen Effect podcast today, Greg.
Well, certainly y'all are welcome, and I thank y'all for inviting me and having me. I was kind of worried that it was going to be one of these experiences that reveals just how behind the times and how computer or technology illiterate I am, but y'all made it very easy. And like I said, I just really enjoyed, visiting with you guys. This is kind of like sitting down with y'all and visiting with y'all at lunch, and
Which is what we were going
enjoyed
for. That's exactly what we were going for.
I've enjoyed it immensely. And to all the folks in the audience, thank you for allowing a long-winded old ham and eggs plaintiff attorney to come in and burn some of your daylight.
Now, all right. Thank you, guys. We'll see y'all in the next one.
All right.